So, to continue, the food forest functions on a 7-layer system. You're not growing based on 2-dimensional area, but 3-dimensional volume. Because you're growing up as well as out. And so here's some cedars. And so your top story is way up there. And then you have your understory, which are these slightly shorter trees made up of mostly younger trees, or trees that just simply don't get taller than 15 to 20 feet. The upper story is normally like 45 to 60 feet. Pine trees, I think, can get closer to 60 or 70 feet high. There's a few other tree species that will get taller than that, depending on your region. Obviously, things like redwoods on the west coast. So those are your tree layers, and then you have your shrub or your herbaceous layer. Then you've got your vining layer, which I showed you as the greenbrier and the muscadine. Which out here you also have. I'm actually removing the honeysuckle because it is Japanese honeysuckle. There is an American honeysuckle. I don't remember the name of it botanically, the Latin for it. But it is indigenous to North America, but it produces a different type of flower. It looks slightly different than the Japanese honeysuckle. They can be identified separately, even though they're a part of the same genus. They're different strands, different species, really. But so you've got the upper canopy, the lower canopy, the herbaceous, the vining. I showed you the ground cover as periwinkle. There are other ground covers that will grow. Down the hill from here, there's English ivy, which is incredibly invasive, and I'm slowly removing it from the trees and getting it to die back some. But there are other ground covers and vines that will take over the forest floor. Pines are actually really good at keeping ground covers out because of the way that they mulch and acidify the ground that they grow in, because pine family members prefer acidic soil. And we're nearing the back of this garden right now. So not everything in here I'm able to identify. I'm not going to pretend to be an absolute total expert on everything plant wise, but for the most part I feel confident that I could live decently in the woods and not starve to death. This here is Creeping Johnny, one of my favorites. You also hear it called Virginia creeper. And this is another vine layer plant that is native to this region, provides food for the birds. It is technically in the same family as poison ivy, but it does not produce an allergic reaction like poison ivy does, so don't be afraid of it. It's not going to hurt you. It's not edible. Don't worry about it. It's for the birds. Leave it alone. Let it be. And here you can actually see where some squirrels have come through. See, I've actually tracked animals through these woods, as I have through many other sections of trees. This, I believe, to be a rose. It looks very rose-like anyway. And like I said, I'm not the greatest at identifying things. I'm still learning a lot of stuff. And that's to say that I've been at this since I was 19. I'm 33. You can do the math. I've lost track of how many years I've been at this. But this is what I love. This is what I plan on being involved with for the rest of my life till the day I die. And this isn't necessarily the healthiest or most productive food forest that I could show you, but it's what's in my backyard. And that's why I want to walk around here and talk to you about this while we're in the garden. Because food forestry, I think, is being romanticized in a lot of ways and idealized. And we lose track of what is and is not edible, and you know, what's going on with why are we planting these things and why are we growing these things. Because not everything in the food forest is for my consumption or your consumption. It is here for the squirrels, the deer, the bugs, the birds, the lizards, everybody that lives out here. My mama always said, all God's children gotta eat. So I apply that in a very broad spectrum. Got more ferns through here. And if you see stuff that you feel like you can identify that I have not identified, whenever I post this, feel free to identify things in the comments, put the time signature of when it came through the screen, and be like, oh, well, at 5 minutes and 55 seconds, I saw blah blah blah, and we can all go back and review the video and learn together. So for me, this is probably the most important thing that we need to come to understand about agriculture and about our impact on our environment as we are doing things in our lives to produce what we need to live. Understanding what I just said about, not everything in the food forest is for my consumption. Hold on, I just caught a thorn in my foot. Ooh, that one got in deep. Look at there. And see, this is also why I love the woods. This I believe might be a possum. The skin of it looks kind of like, oh yeah, it's a possum. That's a possum tail right there. This is definitely possum bones. So, so this is the back edge of the forest. This is actually, and I say forest, it's a little brack of trees. And here's some deer tracks. If you can see these, that's deer. And we're actually on a deer trail. I follow deer trails. I rarely ever make my own trails. I normally follow animal trails, and that's one thing to take in consideration, to be respectful in the forest and to not create trails where it's unnecessary, because that can encourage soil erosion and loss of good ground. So using animal trails and being respectful of the animals as you're using their trails. This is chickweed right here. This is edible. You can eat the leaves and the flowers of this plant as a salad green. You can eat it raw or in soup or stir-fried or however you like it. I personally, my favorite way is raw. It's very sweet, kind of grassy taste. Really delicious. But even as you come out to the other side of this, and you can keep following this deer trail right on out, you see how it goes? And then of course, now depending on season, you'll find all kinds of mushrooms out here. I haven't identified them all, and I'm not very good at identifying mushrooms. See all these deer tracks? This is amazing. This is fresh. Somebody just came through here maybe last night, no, they did actually come through here last night, that's right. I heard one bleeding, not bleeding like blood, but bleating. Like, they make that noise, they go, if I can recreate it, it's like, bah, bah! I don't know, I can't do it, I can't get that pitch. But they make that noise as a warning to other deer in the area that there's something dangerous going on. And you see what we just walked up into, right? You see how we went from forest floor to forest edge. Look at all this chickweed. There's kudzu right here in front of me. This is kudzu. And it's invasive. I'll probably come in here, track it down, and remove it. But I'm not worried about it, because when I do track it down, I'm going to harvest its tuber, and I'm going to eat it, because it is an incredibly nutritious food. The main thing about urban food forestry and guerrilla gardening is you do need to be aware of property lines and where you are in the forest, and also be respectful of other people's property. So I'm not sure exactly what this building is over here, but I tend to not come back here very often. I just wanted to show you this. I mentioned roses earlier. This is a wild rose bush right here. There's wild blackberries out here. Tons of cleaver right in here. There's actually enough cleavers I could probably harvest some and dry it and make it into various things, salves and ointments. We just passed by some honeysuckle. Then we come back deeper into the tree line. This is a whole chunk ton of chickweed in here too. So the best education that I've ever received has been observation. You know, I can get the book learning. Anybody can get the book learning. Go to the library, get on the internet, check out the books, you know, take classes, do all those things. But there's a lot of things that I read about in books that I did not understand until I walked into the woods. Now, reading it from a book or hearing it in a class from a teacher helped me to better understand it when I experienced the situation in the woods or in the meadows or along the seaboard or wherever I was, whatever kind of climate and terrain that I was in. But I have not learned more than what I have learned simply by sitting under the trees and observing, watching, waiting, instead of being like, oh, well, I'm going to come in here and do this and manipulate these things and alter that. Instead, I look and I pay attention to what is going on already and what nature is doing on its own. And then I plug myself in as an indigenous species would, to where I try not to be invasive. This is usnea, by the way. Medicinal lichen. It is also considered edible. Some Native Americans used it as a seasoning. I know the Cherokee used it as a seasoning in their food. I don't know if they still do to this day. Some might. I don't know. I've used it in food, and it's one of my main medicines. So sitting and observing, walking around, just looking at the whole thing, there's a lot that we can learn about it. And we don't necessarily need to know the names of everything. This is rattlesnake plantain. This is not the downy variety, but it is within that family of plants. This plant is endangered and grows mainly in pine forests. It is medicinal, and it was over-harvested for its medicinal use, and a lot of its habitat was lost due to deforestation for lumbering and urban industrial development, which is probably one of the greatest detriments to our environment and personal as well as planetary health or ecological health, is the industrial urban complex and the way that it is being managed. It's really bad. Like the majority of the problems that we're having in ecology are in response or caused by poor management. We think we know better than what nature does, and we think that we can tell nature how to do things better, when really we need to stop and sit down and get quiet and listen. We need to listen to the wind and the birds and the water running through the creeks and streams, and we need to watch and listen everywhere that we go and let the environment remind us how to live within it symbiotically and cooperatively. So here we are at the end of another 15 minutes. I could write a stack of books and go on for hours and hours, days and days about how these concepts can be applied and how to further our understanding and use of this information. But I'm going to sign off here because my phone doesn't like doing a lot of videos. And I hope that you enjoy this stuff as much as I do, because I can't do it alone. And it is growing. This is a growing popularity in food forestry and sustainability. More and more groups are doing it and having a great deal of success. So I'm not alone. I know that I'm not, and I know that I have a lot of friends who are into this too. So I hope that we all continue to learn and develop our skills in this area so that we can hopefully regenerate our planet to a healthy state, bring it back to a healthy state so that we can live here longer, healthier, and more happily. Hopefully with more peace and tranquility and all those kinds of things. Because I don't really see the point in living if we can't be at least happy and healthy to some degree. I want to say more stuff, but I'll just keep talking and talking until my phone fills up again and nothing makes sense. So, welcome to my garden.